to Ethiopia's development goals. And experts called for strategic genetic investments to transform Ethiopia's dairy industry. Ladies and gentlemen, this is EBC English News with me, Shfaraulako, and many thanks for watching us. Now, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has visited watershed development projects in eastern Hararge zone of Oromia regional state. During his visit to the area, the Prime Minister was joined by the Chief Administrator of the Oromia regional state, Shimallis Abdisa, and other federal, regional, and zonal officials. Upon arrival, Prime Minister Abiy was greeted by a huge crowd hailing from all walks of life. Social media post footage from the regional president office show. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Gideon Timotheus, held bilateral discussions with the Israeli ambassador to Ethiopia, Abraham Nuguse, focusing on expanding diplomatic and economic cooperation between the two countries. The meeting focused on key strategic areas such as trade, investment, and technology transfer. Both sides reaffirmed their commitment to strengthening collaboration, with a particular emphasis on leveraging Israeli investments in advanced technologies to support Ethiopia's ongoing economic reforms and development initiatives. Ethiopia and Israel share a deep-rooted historical connection dating back to biblical times. And a cornerstone of this relationship is the Ethiopian Jewish community, with over 180,000 Ethiopian Jews residing in Israel. This community serves as a living bridge, reinforcing cultural, historical, and diplomatic ties between the two countries. Moving on, the governor of the National Bank of Ethiopia, Mamo Meheratu, met with the ambassador of China to Ethiopia, Chen Hai. Following the meeting, the Chinese embassy in Addis Ababa emphasized China's continued support for Ethiopia's economic and financial reforms. In a post on the social media platform X, formerly Twitter, the embassy reaffirmed China's commitment to promoting investment in Ethiopia, citing the country's favorable investment environment as a key factor. Welcome back, and now moving to stories selected for detailed analysis. The International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, says it is working to enhance livestock productivity and support food systems transformation in Ethiopia through innovative research and strategic partnerships. Meanwhile, an expert calls for strategic investment in livestock genetics and improved feeding programs to unlock Ethiopia's dairy potential and stimulate economic development. Goshuma Lisel reports.
The International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, is at the forefront of improving Ethiopia's livestock productivity, focusing on enhancing dairy breeding programs and fostering climate-smart agricultural practices. Through strategic collaborations and innovative research, ILRI aims to address the sector's productivity challenges while supporting the country's broader food systems transformation.
We've done a lot of work on dairy, so on dairy breeding, to bring in better genetics to improve the breeds in the country. We have a group that is leading the East and Southern Africa work right here at ILRI in Ethiopia. They work very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ethiopian Institute of Agriculture Research to bring in climate smart agricultural innovations. And this is to try and help with the resilience of the agriculture sector.
Despite having Africa's largest cattle population, Ethiopia's dairy sector faces critical challenges, including low milk yields and genetic potential. Experts, including Professor Katsiangs, emphasized the need for strategic investments in livestock genetics and feeding programs.
The genetic potential for milk production in many of those animals is lower than what's necessary to meet the needs for milk. And so I think one of the first investments that needs to be made is improving the genetic potential of Ethiopia's cattle population for milk production. But as we are doing that, we also have to pay attention to feeding programs, to the health management of the animals.
One key aspect of ILRI's work is improving livestock genetics through breeding programs. Dr. Namokolo Kovic, ILRI Director General's representative to Ethiopia, emphasized the institute's success in dairy breeding, which enhances local breeders to increase milk production.
The first problem is the low productivity of the breeds that are commonly used in Ethiopia. So you have a cow, for example, that will produce 1.5 liters of milk per day. And yet it is possible to produce 16 liters per day from one cow. And it can even go beyond that to 30 or so. So the implication then is a lot of our research is really around trying to increase this milk productivity. And we do that through different ways. One is through genetics. The other is also looking at feed quality, because even when you have good genetics, if the quality of the feed that you are giving the animal is not good, then you will not get those higher productivity levels.
In addition to genetic improvements, Professor Curtis emphasized the importance of strengthening agricultural extension services to educate farmers and support the transformation of the dairy industry.
A very important part, I think, is to bolster the agricultural extension so that we can develop and share educational materials with the farmers out in the field. And so there's a multifaceted approach which is needed.
ILRI is actively involved in Ethiopia's food systems transformation, aligning its research with Yelema Trufat or Bounty of the Basket initiative.
And our entry point is through research, the research that we are doing to develop innovations and technologies that can help us produce more of these nutrient-dense foods that the Yelemat Tirufat is asking for. So eggs is one, which I mentioned earlier. Milk is another. And then, of course, you have other nutrient-dense foods like fruits and vegetables, which some of our sister centers, like the World Vegetable Center that is also here on campus, is working with. So we are contributing and we are mapping our research activities to the goals of the Yelemat Tirufat so that the innovations that we come up with in our research can actually contribute to the Yelemat Tirufat being realized.
As Ethiopia's dairy sector moves toward transformation, experts advocate for a multifaceted approach integrating genetics, improved management practices, and industry collaboration to build a sustainable and thriving dairy industry.
And finally, in business, Ethiopia's Finance Minister Ahmed Shide says domestic revenue mobilization is central to achieving the country's development goals. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Revenues says it is working diligently to improve tax administration and collection systems. These remarks were made at the East Africa Domestic Revenue Mobilization Conference, which kicked off Tuesday in Addis Ababa. Shagamata has the following report.
The Ethiopian Ministry of Revenue, in collaboration with the IMF East Africa Regional Technical Assistance Center, has organized a four-day conference in Addis Ababa under the theme Domestic Revenue Mobilization to support development goals. Ethiopian senior officials, revenue authorities from 11 East African nations, IMF Africa East representatives, global partners, among others, are in attendance. Minister of Finance Ahmed Shide indicated that domestic revenue mobilization is critical to invest in important sectors like education, healthcare, infrastructure, among others. The minister also pointed out that the government of Ethiopia has initiated extensive tax reforms to increase the tax to GDP ratio, noting significant results have been registered so far.
Achieving efficient and equitable revenue mobilization requires collaboration, innovation, and strong policy frameworks. The government of Ethiopia has initiated extensive tax reform, including establishing a national tax reform task force. The Council of Ministers has approved the National Medium-Term Revenue Strategy, which directs domestic revenue mobilization efforts while accounting for economic growth and the tax system distributional impacts. Additionally, recent amendment to VAT and excise proclamation aim to significantly increase the tax to GDP ratio. We are now advancing to the next phase of revenue mobilization effort in line with the National Medium-Term Revenue Strategy to further strengthen domestic revenue collection.
Minister of Revenue Saina Alam Nuguse for her part outlined that mobilizing domestic revenue is not just financial obligation, but also it is a foundation of strong, self-sufficient and thriving economies, critical for achieving national goals, financing important public services, and ensuring better lives through sustainable development for future generations to come. She also highlighted that her ministry is assessing to recognize strengths and weaknesses of tax system to improve tax administration.
Along with our national midterm revenue strategy, our ministry conducted a true health check of our tax administration in 2024, using the tax administration diagnostics assessment tool, who is here available. He is presenting today is the team members who is working on TADAT assessment. The assessment was pivotal for recognizing both the strengths and weaknesses of Ethiopian tax system, providing comprehensive look at how our tax administration is performing. By enlisting the help of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, for this assessment, we gained valuable insights into the areas of needing reforms like digitization, tax collection method, taxpayer service, tax compliance, and public perception.
Clara Mira, AfriTac East Center Director, underscored that revenue mobilization in East African countries is improving slowly. However, workable medium-term strategies and policies are critical to boost tax administration and tax collection, noting the significance of this workshop to share best practices among countries.
As our latest regional economic outlook for sub-Saharan Africa at the IMF states, the outlook for the region is slowly improving. The difficult policy adjustments are starting to bear fruit, as we see that internal and external imbalances are narrowing, with the medium primary fiscal deficits narrowing and the median debt to GDP ratio no longer rising, but at a high position. And inflation is projected to decline. However, and this is the however, we know that there are vulnerabilities ahead of us and that they persist, and that there are many imbalances ahead of us that are very high in some countries. We have low debt service capacity, we have rising debt burdens, and we have a funding squeeze that we've been discussing that keeps continuing. So it's becoming difficult to access or afford financing for many countries in the region.
The 4-day conference is said to be critical to engage in meaningful discussions, share best practices, and explore solutions to enhance revenue systems among East African countries.
Well, dear viewers, you have been watching EBC World English News. Now a quick recap of the top stories. Finance Ministry says domestic revenue mobilization is key to Ethiopia's development goals. And experts call for strategic genetic investments to transform Ethiopia's dairy industry. And with that, we come to the end of today's news. Many thanks for watching us. Bye-bye.